Sounding great, Alex. Nice mock-up, nice score. Uh, I really love this. There's a lot to talk about, and yet I think there are a lot of really strong points. I'm not so sure about some of the weight that you're putting here in the base, and some things I think are a little unnecessary. Like, for instance, this D here and the double bases just seems to sort of drag everything down right when there needs to be some independence of line, like a soloistic, right, unaccompanied kind of a line. Right now we're just kind of giving it weight it doesn't need, I feel. And I'm wondering whether or not, like, say, things like the timpani roll here could have been possibly done by softer cello cello tremolo, for instance, right? Because it just really, But of course, part of that is the mock-up, right? The sound of the mock-up. I mean, I would almost like, just to really be sure that it wasn't taking over, I would almost want soft mallets here. But then you use it again, right? So maybe you don't need. Like, maybe it would be better to have cello tremolo here so that you had some sort of differentiation in role. All right, well, aside from all of those points, right, and there are some others I'll bring up, I think it's pretty strong. And there's some wonderful moments, like right here, like this little harmonized commentary in the bassoons. Adding, of course, bass clarinet and English horn and so on, and the middle strings. Really nicely done. Just a lot of cool moments. So, question is, like, how much does it hold together? By now, Alex, if you have been following along some of these other evaluations, I hope you have. You probably have already heard my mild objections to people not having taken to heart my caution in the 12 common scoring errors about just dumping the piano style slurring onto winds and strings, right? Because bowing patterns and so on. But like, you didn't slur over repeated notes, right? So at least that is good. But like, there are so many slurs across strong beats, right? And here you're slurring across the middle strong beat. Here you're slurring across the downbeat and so on. I mean, so like, where is the downbeat? But of course, you have that punctuated by pizzicato and other instruments and so on, contrabassoon. But I just feel it's just sort of sloshy, right? There's the shape to it is just not very, it's just not very clean. It doesn't, like for instance here, like, you've got some slurring across the downbeat, whereas you have like a nice bowing pattern here. I think that you could have this down up, right? I think it would work better rather than slurring all the way across it. You just have the players just have more, they just have more control over nuance and which you could have been adding some, right? You could have made this swell a little bit in the middle. Same thing here. All right, well, let's look at the orchestration. So we've got harp doubling our flutes and oboes. I don't think you need two flutes here. I think you get a much beautiful, more intimate sound with just one single flute, especially since you've got one single solitary oboe player down there, right? So just really kind of no need to go to A2 there. A2 flutes have a breathier sound, right? Like, while you're adding a little bit of firmness to the tone, it doesn't, I feel it becomes possibly a little bit more obscured in soft playing. All right. And then this little touch of horn right in here. In your mock-up, it didn't sound too interfering, right? But it might. So, in practical purposes, for practical purposes, the horn player may decide to just really back off so that they blend with the rest of the winds right in here, especially the clarinets. and don't overwhelm them. And the same thing with like playing in the middle here, along with the strings. Just really important for the horns not to shout out. So they're probably going to be playing pianissimo anyways, with by comparison to the other instruments. So why not mark it, right? Just with this close kind of scoring that you're doing with everything so integrated together with the horns and so on, to get a seamless blend. Make sure that your slurring style is the same for the same line, the same gesture. Yeah, and once again, I don't think this is necessary at all. The way that you've got some of these slurs, yeah, across the bar line and so on. I mean, it's just like there's no. It's almost like there's no. There's no push to the downbeat anywhere. Right. I mean, and in some scoring that's really great, but like in this sort of simple folk melody kind of influenced scoring, I think that after a while I just start to feel the need for any kind of a tonguing or slurring on the downbeat, right? Like when you get to here, it's just as lovely. This moment is just great, right? So why can't it all be like that, or why can't there be more like that? And especially like bringing emphasis to this line in here. So beautiful, right? So nicely done. And this is great with with all of this happening around it, you still maintain the relationship of the upper winds to the clarinets, and of course the strings and everything else. So you're saying that you want this high D, so this would be like could be D touch 4, and then this could be same thing here, G touch 4. So I mean those are very delicate, and especially if we're going for A2 flutes here. The flutes will really tend to dominate here. While this might sound a little icy in the strings, the warmer sound and breathier sound of the flutes will tend to dominate here if you're going for harmonics, but it won't be totally overwhelmed, but it just won't be as unified a sound, possibly. I mean, it'll be a really beautiful glassy sound, right? If the players are trying to balance, but you have kind of taken away that ability because you're not giving the hairpins to the first violins, right? So why couldn't they, like, by the time, like, this note is going to be nice and strong for the A2 flutes, but this will be very icy and backgroundy, right? And then you have this big roll on the harp, which will distract from it further. This is kind of strange. I wonder if this is a Dorico thing, or I don't know what application you were using here, but I'm seeing like different levels to get different effects. And maybe you could make one copy of your score for me that had all of the pitches of the notes, all the note heads sitting on the line, and then you could have another one for playback, where I guess the different positions of these notes not playing on the line would trigger different sounds. Once you've mentioned that it's triangle, it is always triangle. You don't have to keep mentioning it, right? It'll be triangle until you say otherwise. All right, and then continuing on, nicely done here. The English horn and the middle strings working together, and yeah, it's just really beautiful. I like it. The contrabassoon is really. I mean, I wonder if the contrabassoon could just play what the double basses are playing staccato, rather than the kind of these longer tones. I mean, I know what you're trying for here, and that is to get like a sort of more of a piano sounding left hand, but the piano doesn't do this, right, in the original. So I feel it comes off as pretty heavy, right? There's some problems with weight. So I think that adding weight to this beginning section is not a bad idea. Adding too much weight possibly works against certain things, like the introduction of the kind of the flowing, surging left hand. It sort of gives the game away, I think, when it's too heavy. But that's just an aesthetic decision or aesthetic observation. This is great, walking up in 6 and then forming this 4-part harmony here in the horns. Really nice scoring, and just in general, nice division of duties between the players. I feel that this is nice and strong, and this is great right in here. with the seconds in unison on the bottom there, right? And then you have these pitches here, and then and of course, like you're controlling the horns. I'm missing the diminuendo here, right? Just bringing everything down to a pianissimo at the end would be really nice, right? And then this can surge forwards, right? Because the way that you've got it set up now, it's the same dynamic, right? So, we just finished this. Oh, and by the way, it's the same thing, right? So I'm not really feeling the differentiation here. It's not really bringing things to a close, except we're just in the way that winds and brass or horns bring their articulated notes naturally to they sort of have a teardrop ending to them. They just kind of close them off. So I just really feel that you could have easily brought this down to a pianissimo here at the end, right? And even just added like a pianissimo here at the end of the roll. A lot of rolled timpani. Okay, so moving on to the next section here. So once again we have A2 flute. So like that sound, right? It's a little bit like Nathan's piece that we just looked at in the previous evaluation in this series, which had a lot of piccolo on top, right? So here you have the A2 sound of the flute on top, right? Now here it is joined together with the strings, but here it also is joined together with the strings, right? So it's the same approach used again. Now, some of the context is different, but some of it is the same, right? Some of these, the clarinets and bass clarinet working together as middle voices. So I'm a little conflicted about this. I feel like you're kind of using some of the same strategies again, right? And that's not to say that this is not beautiful scoring, because it is really delicious and juicy and nutritious. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not making fun of your piece. I think it's really cool. It's very. I'm just making fun of my my metaphors. So I also love the separation here. Like you've got A2 flutes and violins, right? And then you're throwing in the cellos here, right, to take the bottom part of the octave. So, who is doubling these cellos, right? It is your first clarinet. So, it is an interesting sound, right? Tenor register cello and like lower shallow throat tone register clarinets, right? So you would think that at first that those timbres would sort of work against each other, but they have but there are ways that they can blend, and it just kind of like the difference between them sometimes is less important than the way that they can merge together, because of the sort of the thinness of tone of the clarinet can match with the sort of urgency and chestiness of the cello, right? There's something really similar about about some of the overtones, and so they can make an interesting combination. So I would say in this case, a good support for the octave above, right? And then of course, like these instruments in here taking the harmonized thirds, the same or the harmonization of the melody below in thirds, just as we're seeing here in the B flat clarinets and bass clarinet, or the second clarinet and bass clarinet, right? So it's an intriguing idea, and this is really lovely right in here. I'm not so sure that these in terms of weight, right? I'm not so sure that you need to really hang on, especially with contrabassoon. I'm seeing a very free use of contrabassoon. Contrabassoon doing these really beautiful, fluttery, gorgeous kinds of lines. That it's, I wouldn't say that it's impossible or even that, that in the end, like I could say, well, it's not really suited to it, because what is, with players being, having really great technical prowess, who's to say what is suited? But it's like what works with the orchestration plan that you've got, right? And I think that like the whole question here of having kind of this beautiful soaring melody that is pushed from below by rising, like this rising line that goes through the wind. Like as the line rises through the wind, I feel you're dragging it down with like these little added notes here in the double basses and hanging on with the contrabassoon, right? Rather than just letting the contrabassoon just sort of come to a stop as it trades off into the second bassoon line. So yeah, so that's just my observation in here. Like that would be the one fly in the ointment. That I feel like that if that was cleaned up a little bit, I feel that the music would appear to sort of leap upwards constantly, right, and just have this wonderful opening, kind of like an opening flower, right, like sort of springing off of a springboard, rather than kind of feeling that like whenever I jump off the springboard, there's a chain attached to my leg. Do you see what I mean? That's what it sort of feels like. There's a kind of something chaining the music down to the bottom with that. So poco a poco crescendo to mezzo forte. See, it's like I love this. This is just really well designed, well defined when you're using text here. There could have been a bigger swell here, and I think that it's almost suggested by the music that they're like here, crescendo to what, right? How big is it getting, right? So I think that this could be thought out a little bit better, just like the way that you've got it here, right? You just really have decided how it's going to go and where you're headed and everything else. And it's good that you're holding back on your horns. There's just a lot of really, a lot of lessons that I have discussed over the past few years in these evaluations. Just really feel that you're soaking a lot of them up, and it's really, I just feel that it ends up with very, very strong results. Yeah, and I love the way that the roles of the instruments become freer and trade off and so on. Like for instance, this line here going to the second clarinet and the bass clarinet working together more like in unison with the English horn and so on. I think that's all just really, that's it makes for very thick lines, but you're not doubling them with strings. So it's kind of a wind band solution to things, and all the much stronger for that. But then right in here we've got going back to bass clef, the cello taking over this role, and here I think that you would be better off down and then up, down, up, right? So just this and then slur across these 5 notes, and then slur and then slur. That's a much better, much more natural kind of bump da da da. And especially if there is a like a increasing of excitement and energy. Now, however, like contrabassoon, I feel the contrabassoon here is going to, like, once again, like the overemphasis on the solidity from below, right? It's sort of taking the contrabassoonist, putting the contrabassoonist in the spotlight in a way that doesn't necessarily work towards the authenticity of the statement that you're trying to capture here, right? And just in general, the way that you alter things in here and so on is really commendable. And I'm even wondering whether you could have gone even further in doing something to open the music out even more, right? So that it isn't just the same approach for 8 bars, but there is more of an evolving approach that gets, that changes context in some way, so that it brings out, by the time you get to this point here, we have shifted to a different place. Now here, like you do some of that in a way, but like a lot of the same elements are being retained, right? So, for instance, like you started with the cello and so on, and the cello is basically, kind of uh, backing up that same approach with the flutes and the oboes taking over. So I mean that is an expression of that, but I'm just wondering if we could have built up to that 4 bars earlier, right, and sort of laid the groundwork for this in a little bit more definitively. But I mean, it's just it's nothing really worth obsessing over. But like once again, like right in here, I feel that the double basses and the contrabassoons are really just the solidity is kind of dragging down the wonderful openness of the rest of the scoring. Right, I love the horns right in here. I think that this is very, very cool scoring. I love the way that the trumpets and the trombones are working together. I love the fact that they are reduced in dynamic compared to everything else. I think that some of the other elements could come out a little bit, right? It's like we're saying, if we look at this, like everybody is pretty much playing mezzo forte in the upper winds and the strings and everything else. So the connotation is mezzo forte in all the parts, except for like what is coming in here and going onwards and so on. So, I mean, still, I almost feel like I needed another mezzo forte marking here, but it's all right. So I think that the winds and the strings can both have a mezzo forte marking, and the horns and the brass and so on can be mezzo piano. I think that would probably be a better blend. I don't think that the winds need to be backed off here. And then you got this big beautiful soaring line. So here, like, I'm not going to be too critical of the flutes playing low, because they're just like, it's part of their upward arc, right? So that's fine. Yeah, it's all good. And then here you separate them, you separate the parts, and yeah, so I think that it works great. And I love the fact that the oboe is the highest voice here. And then, at the same time that we have the other winds and strings reaching upwards towards it. Really nice scoring right in here. Yeah, just that I just feel that once again, I feel a chain around my leg when I'm listening to this, all right? That doesn't mean that you can't come in with this low A, like maybe add the basses here or add the basses from this C onwards or something. And I love the boom boom boom. I think this is exactly as much timpani that is needed here. In fact, just cutting or limiting the role of the contrabassoon and the double basses drastically, I think, would not only open this out, but it would also help the emphasis of the timpani, just add more to the sort of upward curve of these beautiful arcs right in here. So yeah, so no problem there. And once again, we're seeing the here we got a new roll. Now here we got snare drum. I would be perfectly happy if you gave me a score that had 3 separate single lines, and one was for suspended cymbal, one was for snare drum, one was for triangle. And then you could just like cut the triangle and bring in you could just have one, you could just mention what instrument was being used at once, or just have the 3 lines on the first page, and then just the 2 lines on the next page when you don't need the triangle. And this is all great, the harp and so on. Okay, so to continue on, just looking at the orchestration, once again, I feel like if you're going to roll here and then roll there, and there's just so much rolling going on, right? Maybe this would be better off as cello tremolo, and it would, like, the rolling wouldn't interfere so much with our enjoyment of these beautiful arcs. Now, here you have handoffs rather than dovetailing, and I'm going to try to be more precise with this terminology. So a handoff is when one part finishes and the next part starts, that are interpretations of a continuous line, right? A dovetailing would be when when one note trades off to the next note, or the line continues on from one instrument to the next, and one instrument finishes and the next one starts on the same note. So I feel like the handoffs really like underline the character of each instrument being completely different. So if you're hoping for this to be very smooth, a very smooth line that worked its way through all of the instruments in sort of a mysterious way, then you need to dovetail, right? So that might be what is missing if you felt that the results were just a little too separated. In which case, good place for bass clarinet to trade off with bassoon would be sort of the middle tenor register. So on this note would be perfectly safe, and then on this note would be safe to trade off to the oboe, and then on this G, of course, would be perfect for the flute. Once again, I think I'm going to write a tip on like what are good registers in which to trade off from one line to the next between members of the same family, like going from, say, bass clarinet to standard soprano clarinet, or going from the standard B flat or A clarinet to E flat clarinet, and so on. What are good ranges of pitches? Where do the timbres of the instruments match the best? And then like between members of different families, right? So if you're just going through handing off rather than or trading off, right, rather than dovetailing, then if that's what you intended, then it's perfect. Okay, and I like how like they're all the same dynamic and everybody else is hushing down. I would give people a destination, right? So piano diminuendo, definitely I would go down to pianissimo or even triple P, right? Just really bring the volume down in back of these little solo lines, or else people are going to say, I was just found that the texture here was incredibly thrilling, and that big, gorgeous harp roll and the timpani doing that mysterious rolling. Oh, that was just so wonderful, And then the harp came in later. Oh yeah, there were some wind instruments doing something in there. I didn't really pay attention until the flute came in, right? So that's kind of what I feel would be the reaction of like the average listener, the average concert listener. So if you just really bring this down, right? It could even be pianissimo from here and then diminuendo. Right, but if you just really give a destination here, very, very soft by the time we get to the end of this bar, so that just like already it is getting the hell out of the way of these beautiful little solo lines. All right, and then this is nice, diminuendo to pianissimo, and this very, very soft chord, and the harp gets to say what it's saying. This isn't necessary, by the way, but the harpist will get it. If you really are worried about it, just put a slur over the entire thing and get rid of the rest. Right, and then the harpist will interpret it as just one long kind of expression. If you want to be really obsessive about it, you could work out like where the hands trade off, right? Which would be like right around this C. Like these could be left hand staff notes, and then this could be right hand, and then the left hand could come in, and then the right hand could play over the top. But that's a bit obsessive, and this is really great hand over hand, right? So the harpist they love this kind of stuff, right? Or at least the harpists that I've worked with have loved these big, huge chords that appear to have too many notes in them, but it's like it's hand over hand, right? So left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, right? It's just and it's better to write this out than to notate it all out in separate notes and with durations. Yeah, and this is all cool. I think that this is a situation where it would be nice to just have a diagram for the harpist. I think that would work good. And that you're keeping the glissandos low as you play, as this stuff is all playing very, very softly, and that's fine. Okay. I felt that this was actually particularly strong. This so A2 flutes handing off to like oboes plus clarinet. So Yeah, so this is going to be intensely thick and reedy, even at a soft dynamic, whereas this is going to be very kind of breathy. So I'm not totally convinced that this line will feel like it is flowing from instrument to instrument. It will really feel like this is what the flutes are doing, and now this is what the reed instruments are doing. Right. So I'm not totally convinced by that, but I think that the framing around it is really good. All right. So now going on here, we've got timpani rolls and snare drum rolls. Yeah, I'm not sure about the push up to mezzo forte. That's really going to feel intense. And we've have low double bass tremolos and trombone down here and contrabassoon, just like really, really low. All right, so so this is very cool. Like everybody who's gotten to section C has really done something fun, right? I have yet to see a section C that kind of didn't live up to the rest of what the orchestrator was doing. It just really feels like this is a special, fun, lovely little spot, right? I don't think it's a good strategy to have pianissimo strings on top of pianissimo horns and piano winds. I don't think that is going to do a whole lot in terms of having a blended sound. And then, pushing forward to forte here, that doesn't ameliorate the problem. I'm wondering if you started off with the idea that everything's going to be pianissimo here, and then you didn't fix this, you didn't push this back up to piano once you had sort of reorganized the information, or perhaps you felt that the strings should be background. It sort of works in the mock-up, but I still have problems with it. I think that there's a danger that the strings will just disappear completely because of the presence of the horns. So I'd bring the strings up. Leave the brass where it is. I think it's fine. And then and then you could just have the crescendo go all the way across. Have everybody don't go to piano yet. Pianissimo here, and then push into it. And I think that the big, beautiful, bright color of the brass coming through would be more gradual, and it would build through the fabric of everything else going on, right? And just also, of course, bringing up the volume of the strings here. Now here, I don't have so much of a problem with the slurring style and bowing style. I think this is fine. Because you're trying to get everything to be absolutely ultra smooth here in the context of the other things that are going on. So, it's a very long bow, but you have a very soft dynamic. So, yeah, and then here you become more emphatic, and the bow strokes get shorter and so on. So I think that all works. And this is doable on contrabassoon, but it's not necessarily the most kind of. It's all, marcato. It's all good. So long as this is doubling with the double basses, then I think it's fine. And then here you have got the timpani going chunk, 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 chunk. So marcato, yeah, so I might not even drop in the marcato until later, but you sort of want to start the style of articulation. Yeah. So that's all good. Yeah, nice. So you can see I just don't have huge problems with this. And you're avoiding, for the most part, kind of flutes that are too low, except in places where they have a natural upward curve and so on. Yeah. So just no big huge problems there. Yeah, I really do like this, Alex. So thank you so much for all of the calculations and the inspirations and machinations that went into this score, and for making it a part of the 2022 Orchestration Challenge. It's much appreciated, and your continued presence is also appreciated, and boy, I am hoping that you will be involved in over the next 3 years in these continuing series. Yeah, it's and then after that, I don't really have any set plans for 2026, but I'm sure that they'll start to pop into my head. But yeah, very, very specific plans for the next 3 years. And I think that you would do great in all of them if you can spare the time. I don't know, but by that time, who knows what you'll be doing with your career. You might be sitting around, working on a film orchestration team or orchestrating somebody's opera for them, or you might be composing your own operas or doing who knows what. You might have a massive commission in 2025 that you can't be involved. That would be a shame. But whatever happens, I hope to see more of you around and more of your very nicely done, very very beautifully crafted efforts, and I so much appreciate your support on Patreon. It is really helping me. It's helping everybody else out there, and also musicians in Ukraine, which is so important right now. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody watching, and the comments are below. You know what to do, right? Let's give Alex some feedback, like some things that maybe I missed or didn't have time to mention, and your own thoughts, and where you differ with me on certain points, and and also just even just to tell Alex how much you like their piece. You don't have to be an expert to say that, right? So yeah, it is definitely an orchestration that is worthy of comment and conversation in the spaces provided below. So over here in New Zealand at this time of day, probably 2 weeks before the release of this, I'm going to take a little break now and look after my son who is homesick from school. And then I'll come back and I'll do a few more today and just really try to get ahead. I'm spending this week, as I am telling you now, as I am narrating now to you, getting a little bit ahead because of the really slow processing speeds of YouTube. I really wish that I could record an evaluation the day before I drop it or the day that I drop it, but YouTube is just being unpredictable. I'll upload a 30-minute video, and then YouTube will will process it in 15 minutes and it'll be ready to go. And then I'll do one of exactly the same length, and YouTube will hold on to it for 3 days. So with that, I cannot work the way that I had planned to work, which is really a shame because I just feel it sort of takes away one little bit of joy for me. Right? But it doesn't matter. I'll try to review these as I release them and refresh my memory. So, and hopefully that won't be too much of an added layer of effort. But thanks all. I'll see you really soon.